I was a nightclub doorman for the 14K, who's one of Hong Kong's biggest triad families. One day I set out in Hong Kong to climb up a crane and jump into the harbour. And one of the other prisoners went, "Yeah, good idea, mate. Let's get on the roof," right? And the infamous rooftop siege, you know, that was broadcast all around the world started.
When you say you're injecting it, Chris, injecting speed?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Injecting base.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can inject it.
Where are you injecting it?
Into my arm, mate.
And that's just going straight into the bloodstream?
Yeah. Obviously, I had no money in Hong Kong. By this time, I was heavily in psychosis, so I was basically schizophrenic for a good 3, if not longer, months of my life. And in my mind, like, if I could do that, everything would come good.
Boom, we're on. And today's guest, we've got former Marine, Chris Thrall. How are you, Chris?
Good, mate, good.
First of all, thanks for coming on the show.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You've got a very interesting story here. Your book, Eating Smoke, is all about your life, basically, in Marines, Hong Kong. You end up addicted to crystal meth.
Yeah.
So, but we'll go right back to the start, Chris. Kind of where you grew up and how it all began.
Well, I was born in Bromley, in Kent, or South East London as it probably is thought of now. Lived in the southwest most of my life, when I haven't been travelling, that is, and joined the Marines at 18.
Mm-hmm. Why did you join the Marines?
I was pretty directionless when I left school. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, basically. Didn't really feel like I could do anything either. I think school's kind of set up to fail you back then rather than spur you on. A mate of mine joined the Marines and basically bet me I couldn't follow suit. So I said, "Oh yes, I can," and that was it.
I'll show him. How long were you in the Marines for, Chris?
Excuse me. 7 years in all.
And where did you go? Where were you travelling from?
After training, you do 8 months of training at Lympstone Commando. Then you go to your commando unit. I was in 4-2 Commando, which is based just outside Plymouth. And we went straight out to the Northern Ireland conflict.
When it was at its peak?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of bad stuff?
We were there for the 20th anniversary of British troops in the province. And the IRA were kind of all out to, create as much havoc as they could, or take out as many servicemen as they could, I should say.
Did you see any deaths?
Yeah, we lost a guy in the first 2 weeks, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. And where did you go after Ireland?
I went to Norway to do Arctic training, and then I spent a year on board an aircraft carrier, HMS Invincible.
And how was that then when you went to Norway? Was there much violence over there? Pretty calm?
In Norway?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
not much there, is there?
Probably one of the least
violent
places on the planet. Yeah, it was insane. It was, I think it was my first time to go to a proper winter place, a country that has what I would call a proper winter. And you rock up there and obviously everything's covered in snow, but I mean, everything's covered in snow, not like this country where you might get a light dusting and then 3 days later it's all brown slush and, and it's all sort of left the rooftops or whatever. Over there, everything gets covered round about sort of August time, and it stays that way till March, even maybe April. And it's travelling for the first time, isn't it? It's a real eye opener. Mm-hmm. The funny thing was, or even more of an eye opener, was the first time you put a Bergen on when you've got a pair of skis on your feet. Bergen being your rucksack, which can weigh anything up to, well, even over 80 pounds. Plus you've got a weapon which is swinging around. And skiing's hard enough at the best of times, but this is cross-country skiing, so it's not, your feet aren't locked into the boots like they are when you do downhill. You're just hinged in at the toe, so obviously you can ski forward, you can walk basically.
So it's walking with skis?
Yeah, walking with skis on, and you've got different waxes you put on underneath your skis to help you grip the snow depending on what the conditions are. And the first time you put those, they're pretty much wonky skis anyway on your feet, and then you put an 80-pound rucksack on and a weapon, I honestly thought it was a joke. I couldn't see how it could be possible. And but it's, like anything else, you put your mind to it and you crack on, and you soon see that, yeah, actually it is.
It can be done.
Yeah, it can be done.
What happened after Norway?
After Norway, I bought a house in Plymouth, and I spent my last 4 years in the Marines at a place called Stonehouse Barracks, and it was quite a mundane 4 years. I was doing a lot of guard duty. I was promoted to corporal, so I was partly in charge of organising the guard, as it were. And this would be a 24-hour duty every 3 days. And it was, to say it was pretty boring would be fair. But off the back of it, those 2 days off that I had, I started a business. Started marketing electronic products through a networking company, and I gave it a year's hard work, and then my business really took off in Hong Kong, of all places. So just to give you an idea, I mean, I'm not, probably a bit like yourself, I don't really care much for money at this stage in my life, but back then I was young, very materialistic, and my business was turning over close on $100,000 a month while I was still serving full-time in the Marines. So I put my notice in. In fact, not long before I left, someone else, another Marine said to me, "Chris, you still doing that marketing shit?" And I said, yeah, and I had my monthly bonus check in my pocket. We had to pay checks in the bank back then, right? And I said, yeah, and I pulled out, just being a show-off, I pulled out this check, and my monthly check was £2,700. And this is back in the early 90s, right? So probably the same as £7,000 or £8,000 now. And that was in addition to my military salary. So I thought, or at least I was being heralded by the company I worked for as being the next millionaire, you'd say. I had this massive business in the Asia Pacific. I had thousands of distributors over there. And it all looked good. So I put my 18 months notice in the Marines, and I hesitate to say that's where it all went wrong, because I don't like to go to the negative, but that's where, life.
Yeah, that's where it brings us sometimes, and sometimes you've got to go to a negative to find the positive. So you put in your notice, 18 months notice?
Yeah.
Is that what it is for the Marines?
It was then. I think it changes all the time depending on what their recruiting levels are.
Yeah. So you went to Hong Kong?
Yeah, that was it. I thought, go where the money is, go where my business is the biggest, go where I can obviously show my leadership to my workforce.
So what was the net? Is it network marketing?
Yeah, it was a company called Quorum. Some of your older listeners might remember it.
What was it selling?
It was consumer electronic products, so personal attack alarms, house alarms, car alarms. The problem was network companies can work, but a crucial element is the products that you're networking, you've got to be able to use yourself, because then at the very minimum, if you've got, say, like I had 1,000 people in your network, and let's just say they've got a bar of soap, well, they can use that soap, right? So they can buy, let's say, a bar of soap every month, and you're getting, 2% commission on on the wholesale price of that soap, for example. Well, consumer electronics, it's a bad product to network because you only buy it once. And once you've bought it once, that's it. And as a distributor, I mean, you're not going to buy a car alarm every month, right?
Yeah.
And this is where the downfall was. But it's like anything. It's a bit like the podcasting or the YouTubing or the writing, whatever it is. You have to go through this learning curve to get to the point where you can look back and go, right, now I understand it. And I don't have any regrets. But by the time I got out to Hong Kong, best part of £3,000 monthly check had just withered away to almost nothing. And I was on the train leaving Plymouth to go up to the airport to fly out there, and I'm a civilian now, or I'm almost a civilian. And it was, I kind of had that feeling in your pit of your stomach that what am I doing?
Yeah, you have that gut feeling that.
Yeah, I knew it was going to end in tears. But when I look back, now I understand it was all part of my journey, and I wouldn't have changed it
Were
for the world.
you taking drugs or drinking anything before you went?
I'd done a few pills, bit of speed, nothing, smoked a few joints, never had an issue. You know what it's like. I try to explain this a lot to people. Drugs and addiction are two completely separate issues. Addiction is a mental health condition, and it's driven by most often childhood trauma, whereas a drug is a weed that grows in the dirt, right, and always has done and always probably will do. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is the drugs can't cause addiction. It's the driver, is the trauma behind the behavior. Why do you keep taking drugs? Well, you want to keep feeling happy. Why do you want to keep feeling happy? Well, you're getting this level of comfort in your mind that you've never really had before. Does this make?
Yeah, definitely. I feel the same. I feel as if you're taking something every day to kind of numb whatever it is that you're feeling, is to try and pick you up from your fears or demons or insecurities or whatever it is why people drink and take drugs. But I know some people don't agree with it. Some people think it's sociably to take maybe drugs at the weekend, but for me, I definitely feel as if it's hiding from some sort of misery or pain that you're dealing with. You just don't know how to deal with it, so you'll try different things from outside the body, but it's each to their own. Everybody sees it differently. I see it that way. I see it as, if you're struggling, it's easy to numb it and forget by taking some sort of thing to stop.
The reason I mention it is we're just so out of kilter with what the actual situation is with mental health in this country, and what drives mental health conditions, and what needs to be done about it. And people hear the word drugs and they panic and they think, well, drugs make you addicted. And it's just not like that. And we could have such so much more a forward-thinking strategy with drugs, and by drugs, obviously include alcohol, than we currently have. And so I'm just make the point that no, I never had an issue. They never caused me any problems until I tried crystal meth in Hong Kong, and that for me, I guess you'd say it was like the key in the lock. It was, I'd never known a feeling like that. It was just, Christmas come early doesn't even,
Yeah.
it doesn't even begin to describe it. Just to feel so utterly amazing. It's like you suddenly feel the person you've always wanted to feel. You feel energetic, you feel constructive, you feel great. You just feel so great, James, And of course, that's a dangerous thing, because when that feeling wears off, well, what do you want to do? You want to feel like that again. And this is where the pattern of addiction starts.
Yeah, the cycle.
Yeah, so it's not the drug that's causing it, it's the drug that's kind of acted as a catalyst, if that makes sense. What's driving it is the fact that you've not, you're feeling what you think is normal for the first time in your life. And so you want to chase that feeling, and, you do it the next day or the next week, and then the week after that. And before you know it, it's 3 times a week, and then it's just becomes a daily thing. And the definition of addiction, or certainly the one we work by, I was a substance misuse specialist for a number of years in a clinic, and how do you define addiction? Well, addiction is when you follow a pattern of behavior so much that the rest of your life starts to fall down around you. So you're not tidying your kitchen, you're not going out with your mates like you used to, your car, the exhaust is blown on your car, whereas you would have just fixed that straight away before. Now that you kind of overlook it because you're always chasing this activity.
Mm-hmm. So the first time then, Chris, you must have known the effects of crystal meth, because it was getting spoke about quite frequently in the 90s in America, no?
No.
Was it new to you? Do you remember the first time you took it?
Back when the warehouse clubs kicked off, you buy a wrap of speed, right? And you get it from some gurning dealer, and it's basically 95% glucose, right? And it's been bashed so many times by the dealers coming down the chain. And you still get high off that, and you're high all night, right, until the next morning. Well, crystal meth isn't even speed, it's methamphetamine. So it's already 10 times stronger than that street wrap, right? On top of that, crystal meth is methamphetamine purified into its purest form. That's why they call it ice, because it looks like chunks of ice. Police in Hong Kong would make seizures, and it would be 99.7% pure chemical and methamphetamine, right?
You smoking it?
Yeah, you smoke it. So to give you an idea of the potency, 1 gram that you'd buy in a nightclub, you just do that, it's basically a wrap, isn't it? You do that and you're high for a few hours, maybe 6, 8, 12 hours. 1 gram of crystal meth can last you anything up to a week, when in the early stages, when your tolerance isn't huge. Really strong.
So how much was it for a gram of crystal meth?
It was about 500 Hong Kong dollars, which is about 50 quid.
Is it not death penalty and shit in Hong Kong if you get caught with drugs?
It wasn't a death penalty, but the sentences were really stiff, almost kind of out of touch stiff.
15, 20 years?
Well, there was one lad, British lad, caught with an ecstasy pill at a dance party. They used to hold dance parties in the basements of hotels over there. And this lad, youngish lad, got caught with 1 pill, and the judge gave him 12 years. And obviously it went to appeal, and at appeal they had to point out to this judge that, ecstasy is what a lot of young people are doing, and it's not. The actual words the barrister uses, it's not heroin and it's not cocaine, right? Not that not that you should get 12 years for for any drug, but so I had a few run-ins with the police over there, and I was quite lucky. I always used to hide it really well.
That's the Marines kicking in there.
Well, it was just the fact that, if you're going to get stopped and searched, you just want to put it in a place they're not going to look, isn't it? Right? I used to just put it in the lining of my boot. Yeah. I had like caterpillar boots, and I just put it in the lining, and no one's going to really look there, are they?
So when you started taking crystal meth, you went over there with a clear mindset to build the business, to start doing well and taking it even further. You left your job in the Marines. So when you started taking the crystal meth, Chris, when did it just spiral straight away?
No, like I said, I started to do it. I mean, the very first time I did it, I was working in this computer company selling DRAM chips, which is in memory chips. Again, I write all about this in Eat and Smoke, so I won't bore you with the details. But it was a very funny, very eccentric Chinese trading company. Very old school. The boss was just wacky, again, is a bit of an understatement. And I worked with a guy called Neil Diamond, who's schizophrenic. Funny enough, was in Strange Ways. I was listening to your podcast with, what was that chap's name?
Samsworth.
He's a very nice man.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah.
Good podcast.
Really enjoyed that one. And yeah, just an aside, and again, this is in Eat and Smoke. Neil Diamond, he had, this was before mental health conditions were really recognised. Back at the time where you were either considered a bit slow or a bit this or a bit that, and there wasn't really the provision there for you. So Neil got into it. This is what he told me. I have no idea of it, the truth behind it, but he said he got in a fracas with a neighbour. The neighbour accused him of spying on his wife or something, and Neil was like, "No, I'm just looking for slugs and worms," because he was like a biologist. That was his university degree, and of course, because of his schizophrenia, to him that's just a completely normal thing to say. And he said the guy grabbed a tree branch. The tree branch snapped off. Neil thought he was going to hit him with it, so he hit him and broke his jaw. The judge obviously didn't know Neil had schizophrenia because it was undiagnosed, and he put him in Strange Ways. And he reckons, this is what he told me, when the riot kicked off, the place was filling up with smoke. And so Neil got a broom and he started knocking out the roof pan, the polystyrene roof or whatever to let the smoke out. And one of the other prisoners went, "Yeah, good idea, mate. Let's get on the roof," right? And the infamous rooftop siege, that was broadcast all around the world started. That's what he told me anyway. I'm not for any trying to.
Is his name even Neil Diamond?
What I used pseudonym when I wrote the book. I thought, well, let's just be safe. It's a really interesting thing.
How did you meet him?
He came to work in this crazy company, this crazy computer company, this crazy old boss. We were only there because we were Westerners. Mm-hmm. In his old school Chinese way of thinking, he wanted, when his clients flew in from abroad to buy this DRAM, and it sold for millions of dollars. You could do like a sports bag full is like £100,000 worth, right? And they used to run it illegally through the airports so they didn't have to pay the tax as hand baggage, right? It was a really fascinating period in my life. Tom came to work in that company, and one day on a break, he said, Chris, come in. And he was in a toilet cubicle. And as I said to Sean when I was on Sean's podcast, so if a guy invites you into a toilet cubicle, you're only going to get two things. You're either going to get sex or drugs. And I wasn't lucky enough to get sex. I just got a chronic addiction instead. So, that was that. And but going back to the book, when I wrote it, I wasn't in touch with anybody who I knew in Hong Kong, right? It was 1996, so it was a fair time ago. I still decided, well, look, let's just cover my back, because maybe people just don't want to be written about, right? Which is fair enough. So, and why not? So I just used pseudonyms for everyone. I tried to use my mates' names where possible, so I could say, there you are, that, just as a sort of dedication to my friends sort of thing. Well, Neil Diamond was actually Tom Jones. And I would just, when I got to someone's name, I would just think of the first name that came into my head. I thought Tom Jones, singer, 70s, 80s, was 70s era, wasn't he really? Neil Diamond, yeah, that would do. So he was Neil Diamond. worked with another chap, Richard Burton. So he became David Niven, right? It really was that. I didn't even think more than a few seconds about it. That's how it came around. But what happened is through the joys of Facebook, one at a time, I started to get people going, Chris, I saw a TV program the other night, or I saw this newspaper article, and they're saying you've written a book. Do you remember me? I lived with you, I worked with you in Hong Kong. And I'm like, do I remember you? I've written a book about, you're a main character in my book. And it's been really nice. Really, yeah, it's been amazing to get back in touch with people. That it was like, I don't know, 15 years. I mean, it's even longer now, right? What? Well, my maths is not good at the best of time, but a couple of decades, right? Yeah. And the girl that I had a crush on in this book that people will read about, she contacted me. She's a news presenter for one of the big Australian networks now, and she always said she was going to do that kind of thing. And she's a lovely girl. And most recently, the kind of guy that gets the second amount of attention in my book, a guy called Old Ron, he got hold of me through LinkedIn. And I was like, Ron, do you know how many times I've gone onto LinkedIn, Facebook, I thought you were dead. I thought you'd drunk yourself to death in Hong Kong, because that was his thing back then, drinking, right? And now he calls me every day. It's brilliant. Yeah. It's just amazing, really amazing.
So when you started the crystal meth, Chris, we spoke about it earlier about like kind of hiding from it and numbing some sort of pain. What were you? Why were you doing it? What were you hiding from?
This is completely frank, right? Mm. When you're suffering trauma, you don't know it. It's not like you wake up every day and go, "Hey, I'm in trauma. I'm looking for an escape." You just think you're normal, don't you? Right? And unbeknown to me, my kind of rough childhood was obviously playing. I'm guessing was the driver behind this.
What was the childhood like?
My mum's dead now. Dad's still alive. Lovely people, Jamie. They just couldn't really get it together. They married really young, which was quite normal back then. They had all. I'm trying to pick my words carefully here because I don't criticise anyone. Do you know what I mean? We've all got our crosses to bear, and as I said to Sean, a sorry goes a real long way in my book. And once someone said that's it, then it's put to bed, and that's where all my sort of stuff is now. But anyone listening to this, if you can't picture what a rough childhood is, then read my don't read my book, because I don't even talk about it. But to give you an idea, I mean, I went to like 5 schools before the age of 11. That's 5 lots of bullies that you got to fight. That's do you know what I mean? That's 5 lot of and teachers weren't. Most teachers were. A good percentage of teachers were abusers back then. In some respects, certainly, they'd get physical with you and smash you around the head and thought nothing of it, right? Mm-hmm. And then even adults, you could have a stranger in the street would just come up and give you a thick ear. I remember it happened to me walking through Plymouth once, and my mum turned around and she said, "What's the matter with you?" And I'm holding my ear because this random guy just came up, bang, smacked me around the head. I said, "Well, that man just hit me, Mum." She went, "What? Why didn't you tell me?" Well, I didn't tell her, James, because I thought that was normal. I just thought that's what adults do, and I'm just holding my ear. And
did you get bullied at school a lot?
No, I was really lucky in that department because I wasn't like an angry young man, as in I walked around angry every day. But it's like, you don't fuck with me. Seriously, you push me once, and I'm just going to ignore it. You're going to push me again, I'm just going to ignore it. This is going to happen 5 or 6 times. You do it that 7th time, and then bang, I'm just going to hit you as hard as I fucking can. Do you know what I mean?
Snap.
And then you're not. You know how it is. Once you stand up to a, and that was just my inner anger. You know, my.
So through all the mist of your madness then, Chris, when you went away to Hong Kong, when the business started going down the pan, and then you were on crystal meth, how bad did it really spiral for you?
Oh, I couldn't put it into words, mate. I couldn't put it into words that I think would even. I mean, I tried in the books. You know, I've written this one, and I also wrote a book called 40 Nights, which is more about the aftermath when I came back to the UK. And I mean, to give you an idea, my dad bought me a ticket. Obviously, I had no money in Hong Kong. By this time, I was heavily in psychosis, so I was basically schizophrenic for a good 3, if not longer, months of my life. And of course, it's the same thing again. When you're schizophrenic, you don't realise you're schizophrenic. You just think you're normal, and you know things are a bit strange, or people are a bit strange. But I got back to Heathrow, and my dad was just there, you know, in the arrivals hall, looking for his son. And I walked up and I went, "Right, Dad?" And he went. He thought he'd miss, you know, he thought I must be talking to someone else, and he's like looking. "Dad, it's me." His face just dropped. I'll never forget it. Like, he couldn't recognise me, James, you know. I mean, I left the Marines. I was really into bodybuilding back then.
What weight were you?
Well, to give you an idea, I was about 9.5 stone when I joined the Marines. I was about 14 stone at one point. And just muscle, you know, just working out in the gym and yeah, when I came back from Hong Kong, I was back to the 9.5 stone. I mean, it really sucks it out of you. You know, your cheeks get all sallow, and you know, then the medical people get involved, and they're like, "Stephen, that's my dad. You know, your son's really not very well. He's severely psychotic, and you know, it's best you put him in an institution, and he'll probably be there for the rest of his life." And of course, my parents they don't even know what drugs are, right? And they've got this shoved in their face. It wasn't a nice time. It wasn't a nice time for any of us, you know. I was just mucking on through. It's just, to me, it's just, this is my life, and I wish everyone would just leave me alone, James, you know. But of course, to them, it was just too big a thing. And I then fell into what I now can look back and see was a depression, because I've been in Hong Kong. I was a nightclub doorman for the 14K, who's one of Hong Kong's biggest triad families. So I've gone from a period of homelessness to getting taken in by the 14K, given a job as a doorman, given money to furnish my flat, and I'm like the front man on a nightclub run by these secretive head cases, and it felt amazing, right? And I'm going out in the Wan Chai in Hong Kong. It's like the red light district, the Gangland district, and the Clubland district all rolled into one. And I was out every night immersed in it. And of course I was high as a kite all that time. I had to come back to England where there was nothing, you know. I didn't have a job. I'd let my house go.
What made you come back, Chris?
I didn't have a choice, James.
Did you know yourself that you were dying?
I loved Hong Kong with a passion. Most expats love Hong Kong. That's just kind of a thing. You either get Hong Kong or you don't, and if you get it, you have a passion for it. I got on really well with the locals, which was really important to me. I could speak a fair bit of the language compared to most Westerners. As I said, I was, you know, working for the 14K, which to a lost young man was quite a quite prestigious, if that's the right word. And there's no way I wanted to come back to you. I mean, why would I come back here? I mean, it just seems so.
Were you scared to come back?
I wasn't scared. It's just I went out to Asia to make my fortune. I was young, idealistic. I was driven. Used to go to all the Anthony Robbins, fire. Used to walk on fire and all this, to get my mind straight and all this kind of stuff. And I bought a BMW once, right? All my mates just looked at it and were like, "Is that yours?" Because it's just people on my salary didn't do that. I had a mobile phone when they were still like about that big. And I'm not saying this to like try and impress people. It's just that's how I was, right? And of course I went out to Hong Kong with this, I'm going to make it and business and da-da-da-da. And of course all that frittered slowly away and left me on the street. But even then, still, why would I want to come back? When you're in that state of addiction, you're still telling yourself, I can make it good. You're still telling yourself, well, just get a bit more crystal meth. That'll sort me out for today. And you don't look further than sort of tomorrow or the next day. When I came back to the UK, there was none of that. There was no bright lights. There was no speaking a foreign language. There was no exotic food. Not that I really ate food by this stage. England's kind of good for me now because I'm an old man and I've got a lovely partner and we got a gorgeous little boy and I'm spiritually enlightened, so I can just be happy sat on the bloody pavement, James. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter.
That's a weird question, Chris, but do you miss it?
There's massive stuff that I miss. Yeah.
Do you miss the crystal meth? That feeling it gave you?
Yeah, kind of. But I'm also savvy enough now to know that
It's fucked you up.
Well, it's so complex, James. I'd love to give you a soundbite. Oh yeah, I don't touch that shit. But it's not. It's
not that simple for anybody struggling.
It's really not that simple. But to go back to what you're saying, so I walked into my house in Plymouth. My dad dropped my bags, and he'd taken over the mortgage for me. I was thousands of pounds in arrears, but he stepped in when the bank was gonna repossess it, right? Because he realised I got to keep my son's house, right? Keep a roof over his head. So I stepped through the door. He dumped my bags, and he, bless him, had bought me a bag of food. And then he just burst into tears, mate, and ran out. It was all just too much it was horrible. He was told I'm never ever going to recover. I just laughed at the doctors and said, "You're all just, you're the people that got the problem. I'll be fine. I've just taken a little bit of drugs because everybody calm down here, right?" That was my attitude, and it's still my attitude. It wasn't nice. I'll tell you how I ended up in Hong Kong, which is just, I'll tell you one of the worst points. But going back to the UK is so I'm there. I'm basically slumped on a sofa bed watching daytime TV, and I'm all right for a few days, Then it's like, should I write my CV? Should I brush down one of my suits? You kind of know you should, right? But I just didn't have the will for it. And then I thought, there's an old stereo in the roof. I'll sell it, get a tenner. I'll just get a bit of bass, right? Just one rap, why not? It's not going to hurt. And of course, bang, it was just not straight back into the cycle, but it initiated the slow trickle back into that cycle of I don't want to say cycle of addiction, because addiction's something it probably takes you 30 years to work out, really. Well, that's my experience. And that was it. And then I started injecting it, which is if you call it a trick, it's what someone had showed me in Hong Kong one time. I thought, yeah. Funnily enough, I bumped into Neil Diamond, who'd come to a rehab from Hong Kong, because he actually lived in Hong Kong. His parents were from Hong Kong, right? but he'd been sent to a rehab in Barnstable, and he phoned me up one day. So we hooked up, and of course, two people that love that life, meeting up, what are we going to do, right? And I spent about 18 months on that sofa bed. And I never dealt drugs, that's not a judgment call. It's just not something I ever really knew how to do, and as such, so I wasn't one of these guys that always had a big bag in my pocket and I could dish a bit out here, sell a bit there, and always have some for me. No, I spent my fortnightly benefit all on the gear. It would leave me £1.87 for food for a fortnight. So I'd go to the nearby co-op, buy like a value pack of porridge oats, a value pack of pasta, bag of sugar and 4 pints of milk. And I'd mix the pasta and the porridge, pour in some milk, chuck in some cheap margarine, put in about 20 spoons of sugar, whack it in the microwave for 2 minutes to soften up, and then I just eat porridge and pasta, and I lived on that for 18 months because I had no money. My treat was I'd shoplift Bovril. I didn't really think the shoplifting through. I'd shoplift Bovril and I'd get the value range chocolate bars. I don't know why you would shoplift value range chocolate bars when you can take anything in the shop, but I wasn't out to rob the world. I just needed a couple of bits extra because
Did your dad ever visit you?
Back
on it again.
Eventually, everybody
left you.
Yeah. A lot of people just can't deal with it, Jamie. There's so much stigma back then. There was people had preconceived ideas. They thought, oh, he's doing that. He's going to steal off me. I wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? Even at my worst, I wouldn't have stolen. Well, other than Bovril, right? And it got, those days got dark, which is good because that's what you need to have your wake up call, right?
So when you say you're injecting it, Chris, injecting speed?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Injecting base.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can inject it.
Where are you injecting it?
Into my arm, mate.
And that's just going straight into the bloodstream?
Yeah. I mean,
Was it just base? Any heroin, any coke?
No,
Valium?
my thing was always uppers, I wanted to live life, do you know what I mean? I didn't want to blot it out.
Did you ever leave the house?
Yeah. I mean, I would, but only when I could get gear, The rest of the time I was just utterly depressed. And of course, this cycle of getting high and then having the crash, the come down, would just exacerbate this underlying depression. And I've never really been to see a doctor or never been to a self-help group. Everything I've done in my life has all been off my own back. So it wasn't as if a doctor could tell me, oh, Chris, you're depressed. But even then, they didn't really recognise this sort of things back in the 90s. A lot of mental health, it's all, the advancements have been in recent years, right? So it wasn't, anyone worth their salt could have gone, Chris, you're depressed, mate. That's what it is. You've had this life, you've been up there, you've been doing this, that and the other. Now you're sat on a sofa bed in Plymouth, you're depressed, mate. But nobody...
Did you ever contemplate suicide or anything, Chris, at your lowest?
No, I never did. And part of the reason behind that is this guy, old Ron, that I mentioned in Hong Kong, we were walking through Wan Chai one day, and I was kind of not testing the water, but I was kind of just putting it out there, not for attention seeking, but just I was desperate, James. I was slowly losing everything. I mean, even had to hock my watch to get by. There was so much weird. Everything gets so random when you're in psychosis anyway. Plus, I'm working for the Triads, and that's a random situation in itself. So, I mean, I would leave work and I'd look over my shoulder and I'd see one of the 14K would be following me, and, reporting back, who is, and of course they would, because they're worried you're a policeman, right?
So what was it like working for the Triads?
Well, just to answer your suicide question, because hopefully it can help someone. Old Ron, I said, Ron, I'm thinking about suicide. But I wasn't really, but I just was looking for some interaction with my friend, you know. And he just looked at me and said, no, you won't, Chris. This is what he said. I'm not saying this is how it is, but this is what he said, Chris. People that commit suicide hate themselves, and you don't hate yourself. And I thought, no, I don't, do I? And that was it. I never thought about that again.
What about the Triads? What was that like, working for them?
It was interesting. I mean, you know, I'm just a doorman, James. Do you know what I mean? I'm not like a triad or anything.
Yeah,
I'm just a Westerner who's ended up in Hong Kong. I've burned all my bridges with a series of jobs, either through bad luck or the drugs, right? And finally, the last job I could get was in this bar. And when I was actually looking for a friend of mine, and the guy who I later found out was what they call Dilo, which means big brother, Triad big brother. So that's a gang leader. Triads is not like the mafia. Mafia have a sort of pyramid hierarchy. Triads is more kind of spread out, and you have gangs. You know, the 14K might be the umbrella name, but these gangs they have a degree of autonomy, right? So this Dilo, Paul Ang, he was the gang leader of this gang in Wan Chai that ran the club that I ended up working in. And I went in to see if my mate was there, just to ask my friend, Guilo, so Westerner. Guilo just means foreign devil, right, or ghost man. And I went in to see if Glenn was around, just to say, Glenn, do you know anywhere I can get a job? I'm desperate, mate. And he wasn't there, and I got pointed to this fairly insignificant-looking Chinese guy. And I said, oh, excuse me, Glenn? Is Glenn here? And he said, no, Glenn gone Thailand. I said, oh, okay. He said, you can do doorman job? I said, yeah, I can do door work. He said, okay, start here tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. I was like, yes. It's just, do you know, it's a dream to me. I can now stay in Hong Kong. I mean, had no intention of leaving anyway, but now at least I've got that
income.
You know, it used to be like about £1,000 a month you'd earn back then in Clubland, and that was enough to stay in Hong Kong if you didn't spend a lot, right?
Yeah. So going through it all then, Chris, going through all the drugs, injecting it, taking crystal meth, what made you change? I had what you could loosely term a moment of enlightenment. Kind of had an epiphany. I woke up one morning and I just had my boxer shorts on and I was lying under the TV stand, right? And I had a screwdriver in my hand. And I'm like, what? When you got a speed habit, you get used to waking up and just wondering who are you. I used to have to wake up and I couldn't remember who I was. I literally used to just sit there going, what's my name again? Chris. You know, that's how deep it gets into your brain, especially the tiredness. So I'm lying under the TV with a screwdriver. I'm like, what is going on? Then it hit me. I'd got ready to go and crash, and I slept in a sleeping bag on this sofa bed, right? And always, because your brain's trying to be hyper, even though you're absolutely exhausted, I would only sleep when I crashed out. That would generally be on crystal meth. You can stay awake. I stayed awake 9 days once, right? On base, which is what you get in the UK, you can stay up for like 3 or 4 nights, right? And then it would run out anyway because I didn't have any more money to buy any more. And then I would just crash and I would sleep for maybe 48 hours, then get up and do the depression thing, right? And the
eating pasta and porridge. And I'm trying to work out what it was. Before I crashed, I wanted to do one more thing, which was wire in the plug of the TV or something like this, or it was the aerial socket was broken. And I must have gone to do that and fallen asleep underneath the TV, right? So I woke up and I'm sat there and I'm cold and I'm shivering. And I thought, right, I think I've got some coins in my wallet. I'll go to the corner shop and try and get a sandwich or something. And then I could hear the kids kicking the ball around outside my house. And the funny thing was, like, they all love me, James. You know, they were oblivious to, like, how can you say? They were oblivious to what I was going through. And they used to love me because I'd go out and kick a ball around with them. And yeah, they're just my little mates, do you know what I mean? And they'd knock on my door and say, Chris, can I ask you something? And they'd come out with something. You could tell it's because they came from a single parent family and they didn't have a dad like to ask. And they'd come, you say, you won't tell my mum, will you? And it was really special, mate, you know? And when you remember the childhood I had, where I was basically scared of adults, probably still am now if I was honest, you know? Well, not now, but you know what I'm trying to say. I've still got that healthy, you know. And so I always promised I wouldn't be that adult that kids are scared of. I'd just be the opposite. But I couldn't go out the front door, James, because I'm so messed up, you know. I've lost all this weight. The clothes I had on were just old now. I haven't bought clothes for 3 years or something, right? The trainers I had on were a size too big, and I'd stolen them off a heroin user over a drug deal that went wrong. And I'm there, and I'm shivering, and I want to go outside, and the thought that the kids might be like, Chris, are you okay? It's really hard to explain, and in that moment, I probably had nervous breakdown number 3. And I never knew I don't to this day know exactly what is a nervous breakdown, but I'm guessing that's pretty much close to it, right? And I just started thinking, like, where's my life gone? You know, it wasn't that long ago. I was a young, handsome Marine driving a BMW. I know it's materialistic, but that's, you know, my people would come around my house and go, is this your house? You know, and it was all, now this house is all smashed up. The car is now a Fiesta Super Sport that's in pieces. Most of the engine is in my kitchen, you know, just living in a way. You know, I'm sticking needles in my arm to chase this original crystal meth high, which I thought was happiness, right? And I can't go out the front door and see the people that I do actually love, because I'm afraid that they'll say, Chris, what's happened to you? And I started thinking about, I thought a couple of things. I thought, it ain't working anymore, Chris, is it? This drug thing, it's just not working anymore. In fact, be honest, mate, it hasn't worked for quite a long time now, is it? And in that moment of truth, I just suddenly saw it all. Just suddenly saw it, and I thought, oh my God, what an idiot you've been. I can see it now. I see all my behaviour, you know, all the actions that I did to end up in this mess. And you know, at the time you've lost everything. Now I know I had to lose everything to gain the world, right? But at the time you've lost everything, and I could just see it. I went, Chris, you got to change. It's got to change, and let's not try and be an angel. I mean, my thinking then was, I'm always going to do drugs. You know, I'm not always, but you know, for as much as the negative side, and I know it sounds serious, there is a positive side. I learned so much about myself through it. I mean, I was a guy that was told I was a failure at school. Failure wouldn't amount to anything. Kind of felt that, and then through taking crystal meth, I learned, no, actually, I'm actually good at some stuff. You know, I can draw, I can write, And so I wasn't going to become like a new evangelist and, throw my hands up to the Lord and tell everyone how wrong I'd been. No, it's like, no, I haven't been wrong. I've just been through an experience, but it's got to stop now, Chris. You've got to start, thinking a bit better. And the other thing is I thought, if like all of this relates to that sort of broken little boy that you were when you were 3, 4 years old, it's like you got to start looking after that little boy now. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. It's like you can blame maybe adults for the way they treated you back then, but like who's treating that little boy badly now? Well, you're doing it, aren't you? You're shoving drugs in his arm. You're letting him live like this. And in that moment, it's like I could just see it, and ever since I've just seen it, James. I've just seen the way forward, and so I thought, right, what can we do? We'll take action. How about I don't spend all my money on gear? I don't spend all my weekly budget on the gear and end up in this shivering mess eating pasta, right? What about if I just buy a 10 quid wrap, and when it's gone, and I don't chase it? I'm not on the phone to the dealer or going down the pub trying to meet one of the guys. And that's what I did. And when that first 10 quid wrap was gone, I was like, right, that's it. Tired now, Chris, go to bed. Just go to bed. That's what I did. I went to bed. I woke up, felt rough, as speed's probably one of the worst come downs. Felt rough, but there was something inside, James. There's that spark. I thought, go and put the kettle on, do your washing up, and that's what I did. Put the kettle on, did the washing, and I had this feeling that I hadn't had for a long, long time, and it was something positive, and that was it. And that was, I did my 1 gram a fortnight thing for a while because I was doing so much less of the gear. Your life slowly comes back to you. You've got a bit of money, so you can buy some clothes. You get a bit of luck because, it's all kind of universal, isn't it? You put out good stuff in the universe, it comes back to you. Friends started to come back into my life. Guys would say, Chris, I've got a job on Saturday. Can you come and help me? And I started smuggling some of the things I've done, but I started smuggling tobacco from Belgium as part of a gang, right? And I used the money that I got paid off it to save up to go and work in Africa, and also did a charity fire walk. I set up, it was kind of the world record fire walk at the time, but by mercy of the fact no one had ever done a world record fire walk, so I kind of semi-claimed it. But I set up this 30-foot fire walk, and I got the press there and everything, and then I walked it for 4 times, so 120 feet across hot coals. Made not a lot of money doing that, but that all went in the pot. And then the British Legion very kindly gave me a career development grant, about £1,000. So I got this little amount of money to pay an organisation in Norway that trains you to go and work in Africa with street children. And it sounds funny, but I had friends go, what do you want to do that for? What, you're working for free? I'm like, yeah. They're like, no, I'm going to get you a job on 30 grand a year, Red Cross over there. I'm like, no, you don't get it. That's not what I want. I don't want to go and help people who've got nothing and have 30 grand going into my, that, how does that work? That's it. I don't know if this is making sense, but I had to go and work for free, James, to give back. Yeah. And it's a real hard thing to explain that to someone who hasn't been there, because it was just a feel. It took over me, I saw this advert in a newspaper, volunteers required to go and work in Africa, and I thought, I've got to do it. And it turned out to be, just thoroughly unbelievable experience.
Were you clean then?
Yeah. Of amphetamine, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've never in my life made a, right, that's it, today's the day. I kind of have in recent times with things like alcohol, just because I want my life to be better. You know, you get your life really good, right? But then you want to get it to the next level. And there's certain tweaks you can do, and getting alcohol out of your life is a massive, you know, I found that's been a real massive thing for keeping you at that level of happiness and sustaining it. But I never say never. It's that's not my thing or my experience. My the thing I'd encourage anyone to is you want balance in your life. You know, you don't want like doors that are locked and you're afraid to. You know, you need to work through. You know, how did I develop this psychology of addiction? What were the drivers behind it? And you need to just peel back the onion really and start dealing with them one by one. So I've never had any kind of, right, that's it, I'm going to be this kind of person now and I'm never going to do that again. I just, you modify your behavior as you get older, right?
So when was the last time you took drugs?
Oh, God. It gets to the point where I just can't remember anymore, James. Like we're talking years. It's like spirituality sounds a bit naff, doesn't it? But that's like my drug now. It's like I say, I never say never. It's not an issue for me. I know for some people they say you take that and you go right back in, but when you've worked through all the relapses and the lapses and you understand what they are, they're part of the learning curve, and then you get a lot more control.
What about alcohol now, Chris?
I choose not to drink for the most part, right? Where I've kind of not got myself in a pickle, but it's like, you know, when you go back there again, and
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and what's happened is I ran the length of the UK, so I flew to John O'Groats. I put on a backpack with all my camping gear, and I decided I'm going to run an ultramarathon every day down to Land's End. And I made it my mission to raise awareness of this worrying rate of veteran suicide we've got. And it was quite funny. I got halfway and I broke my leg, but I'm not going to give up, right? There's no way. People are saying, right, hospital, you know, take a hotel. I'm like, no, I'm staying in my tent. I'm going to keep running. Got what we call a shin splint in the, it's where you get like a hairline fracture around your bone. And it's really painful. It's so painful. The bruise comes through the surface of the skin. And so I was taking painkillers, but it was agony. I mean, it was agony to the point where I was limping an ultramarathon a day. And I saw a corner shop, and I thought, plan B. One of the things I always say is have a plan B that backs up your plan A. So I went in, I bought a small bottle of whiskey, and I took a glug of that. And on top of the painkillers, it was just job done, right? And so I was just having a nip of that every morning and I ran to Land's End. But what I noticed is off the back of that, the crash was awful. Mixing painkillers with alcohol, plus the whole fun of being on the road doing something that was pretty great. And I'd say I probably like continued to drink for a week or so after. But it's always the same with me. It just gets to a point where I just think, why am I doing this? I'm not really...
You scared that you slipped back?
No, I'm not scared. I'm not really scared of anything, James. See,
when you were doing it, Chris, were you doing it alone? Like your drugs, you're injecting?
Yeah, I was full on in that cycle, really, you know.
So how's things now then with you mentally?
it's kind of funny because now I'm starting to get into the YouTube thing. That's YouTube, Chris Thrall.
Yeah, check it out.
It's really starting to kick off. Got you to thank for that, and Sean, obviously.
Yeah, no problem.
But it comes with its own level of stress, doesn't it? You know, and then you've got to manage that. If you mean my mental health is related to like back in the day where I completely lost it, I'll be completely honest. Within about, I got back to the UK, I'd smuggled a little bit of ice back with me inside my shoe, and that lasted for about 3 days. And I was in psychosis those 3 days. Again, it's all in my book, 40 Nights. When I stopped that, within 48 hours, my mental health was just completely back. As far as the psychosis is concerned, it was just completely gone.
Were you hearing voices or anything?
You hear your own like inner voice all the time. This was my experience. It's like you've got your normal thoughts, and then you've got like these ghost thoughts, which is where your brain, it's almost like your brain's separated. It's not like what you hear on the telly, for me at least. When you see people talking about on the television, they say, "Oh, the voice told me to do it," and that makes it sound like you've got this, "Hey, right, you go and do." It's not like that. It's like it's your own voice, but it's a bit random, and it's telling you to do sort of quite random things. I mean, I think statistically, people who are mentally unwell are more likely to hurt themselves than anybody else, right? I think that's been proven. And that certainly was my experience. One day I set out in Hong Kong to climb up a crane and jump into the harbour. And these cargo cranes, they're really high. I mean, we're talking about 80 feet high or something. And in my mind, like if I could do that, everything would come good. I'd like understand my life, understand my purpose in it, right? I also felt really almost like persecuted because so many people just are quick to leave your life when you've got a drug problem, and then the kind of backstabbing goes on, and that's not really helping you when you're in this situation, right? And so one night I was on the roof of my building. I lived on the top floor of a tenement, an old tenement block. So it was about 20 floors up. So maybe, I don't know, 70 meters high. Not quite a skyscraper, but a tall Hong Kong building. And spanning across from my building to the building on the other side of the road was a wire cable, and plasticuffed to it was a hose pipe. So you get a situation in Hong Kong, a lot of the homeless live on the rooftops, and you get all these kind of enterprising arrangements. So I'm guessing this rooftop was supplying water to this guy living over there. So it's something like this, right? And in my mind, my commando training, and part of your commando training is you have to be able to cross a cavern by crawling along a rope on your chest. So on your stomach and your chest, you lay down on the rope and you crawl your way across. My mind, this voice that I'm saying is saying, all of my commando training was for this moment when I crawl across this wire, and when I get to the other side, everything's going to make sense. I'm going to understand why I've been put through this. This test, like this it was like it felt like it was a gauntlet I had to run, and everyone was just kind of waiting just on the fringe to come in and go, "Well done, Chris, that's it, you've done it, we tested you and you've come good." That's how I felt, right? And part of being in psychosis is you read into things, stuff that was never meant to be read. So I had this letter from my cousin, and I always kept it in my briefcase, right? Because he'd written to me when I was in recruit training, And he said, "Dear Chris," and he joined as a boy soldier. So he joined as a 16-year-old Marine, and he rose to the ranks of colonel or something. He left that, so really high, which is fairly unusual thing to do. And he wrote to me when I joined out, and one of the lines in the letter said, "When you're marching across Dartmoor in the pouring rain at 2:30 in the morning, you'll probably be wondering, why am I doing this? But I promise you this, Chris, it will all come good in the end." Well, I'm up on this rooftop. I've laid my body onto this wire. This wire could snap at any minute. I mean, I don't even know who's put it up there, right? I don't even know how strong it is. But my mind's telling me, and this letter is clearly telling me, that my commando training, it's all going to come good in the end. So I'm going to crawl across this wire. It's 70 meters above the ground. People on the street just look like ants. The cars look like little Matchbox toys. And I'm up there in my own world of psychosis, thinking I'm doing the right thing. And it was weird. There was a frosted pane glass in the building opposite. And I think there was a woman brushing her hair, and she sort of did it quite regularly. But the hairbrush looked like a microphone in her hand. That's what the silhouette, it looked like she was singing into a microphone. And this voice in my head is saying, it's not over until the fat lady sings. And she was a large lady, right? Large woman. And so that's just another reason I've got to crawl across this cable. It's not over until the fat, right. That expression must have been in my life all this time for this moment. This is genuinely how, this is how I'm thinking. So I'm starting to crawl across this wire. And I got about 5 meters out. And the wire's swaying from side to side. And I suddenly think, Chris, you didn't put this wire out. You don't know how it's fixed on. Look how high you are. It could snap at any given second, right? And my mind flicked to my brother back in the UK, and I'd hardly spoken to him in the year that I'd been in Hong Kong. I was so preoccupied. And it's like, I love my brother more than, this is before I had a family of my own then, right? He's my little brother. We went through a lot of stuff together as kids. He was my only friend at some point, going to these strange schools in the north of England, 300 miles away. And I love my brother, and there I am. And I'm thinking, Chris, what are you doing? If you fall, your brother's going to get a phone call in the UK, and they're going to say, your big brother became a drug addict in Hong Kong and he threw himself off a skyscraper, right? And I'm like, but that's not the truth. I'm not going to throw myself. Do you know what I mean? I'm not doing this because I hate myself. I'm doing it because I've got to prove. I'm like, prove what, Chris? And to who? And I thought about all these like backstabbers and people that had, that I knew were talking about me. And suddenly I was like, what? Why do I even fucking care? They mean nothing to me. And in that moment, again, like another moment of clarity, and I saw it. And I thought about my brother and just how much I loved him, and I burst into tears, and I'm swinging on this rope, and the tears are just dropping from my eyes, and they look like paratroopers jumping from the Hercules. That's what my memory was. And I thought, Chris, you don't have to prove anything to anyone in this world. That's it, except your kid brother. Get off this freaking wire. Mm-hmm. And I climbed off it, and even that wasn't a wake-up call. That didn't. That wasn't in any way. It's a wake-up call, like looking back on it right now. At the time, it was just, that's how I lived.
Now, Chris, have you ever had any help to this day? Anybody you've spoke to?
No.
About your trauma?
No.
Or the shit you went through?
No. There was one very brief period where I was at university, and I was, it was a funny time in my life. My stepdad had died, and he died really young. He wasn't that much older than me. He was kind of like my mum's toy boy, but he died, and it was a nasty he had leukemia, and it ended up, he had a stem cell transplant, and it went wrong, and it started to eat his body away, and he died. And then my mum got poisoning. She died of asbestos poisoning. These are not necessarily in the right, time frame or order, but then I had not related to this, but I had a relapse on the speed. And this time I was earning money, so I could afford it, so I could actually not do the pasta thing and not do the shoplifter. I could just actually buy enough for every day. So I had like a 2-month relapse or something, right? That's fun, going into your university lecture off your head.
So were you working in the university?
No, I had a job. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want to incriminate myself. But I was studying youth work. Wanted to work with young people, and that's what I got my degree in. But I had this kind of relapse, and I couldn't get my essay in on time, is what I'm trying to say. And so I thought I'd pull a sneaky one. I'd go and see the counsellor, because I'd heard if you go and see the counsellor and say you've got issues, then you get like a longer period to hand in your essay, right? So I went to see the counsellor, and he said, "So what's up with you?" And I sort of told him, "No, I don't take myself that seriously, James. To me, it's just, I've just lived my life. All this stuff I'm telling you, that's just been my life. I don't often understand the significance of it." So I told this counsellor a few things that were going on, and he's like, "Oh," he's a really nice northern bloke. He's about 70, so he's about to retire, and he said, "Chris, I've listened to your story, and I'll be honest, son, I've never met anyone like you, and I certainly haven't had any of your experiences." He said, "But I'll tell you this, I'm willing to listen. That's a really powerful thing, James, because I went there just trying to pull a fast one, ended up meeting a really nice guy that I could talk to, and we used to go and have a cup of tea and have a chat. And I'll be honest, he never gave me any pearls, those kind of Yoda-like pearls that you think you're going to get from a counsellor. We just chatted. He actually told me I was in my 30s then. He said I should give up running because I was too old for it, which is funny when you think I did a quadruple Ironman for my 50th birthday in September. I can't remember the point of what I was saying is, so he was the only person I've ever really been to see, and he didn't really provide any kind of therapy. It was just a chat we went for, and I got my extended time for my essay.
Yeah, but you might think that it doesn't need to necessarily be in a doctor's room. It's just even speaking to a friend or a family member or some bystander that you just happen to speak to.
I need to mention 2 things here then.
Okay.
It wouldn't be fair not to say it. One night I was out the back of my house I had this Fiesta Super Sport I told you about. The guy that sold me it with a dodgy head gasket. So my drug dealer gave me the gear to grind in the valves and replace the gasket and everything. And I was out the back of the house wired for like 4 days without sleep, just working 24/7 on this car, and I couldn't get these valves ground in. I couldn't get any compression. Every time I bolted the head block down, I'd turn the engine over and it wouldn't fire, and so I'd take it all off, do it all again, and I was in a real mess by this time. And it was, it was pouring with rain some nights, and I'd set up this canopy so I could just keep working on this car. This is the insanity of it. You don't see this at the time, but looking back, it was pretty extreme behaviour. And so one night, about the 4th or 5th night, I'm there, and I've got my torch set up, or my spotlight, and I'm looking in the engine bay. And this porch light comes on one of my neighbours' houses, and I looked up, and it's a chap I never really spoke to before. I knew he was called Ian, and I knew he'd been in the Navy because we had a mutual friend that went, "Oh, Ian lives in your street." And he walked over, and I kind of didn't know what to expect, really. He said, "All right, Chris." It's about 11 o'clock at night, right? So I'm like, yeah, mate, yeah, I'm all right. He went, fuck off. I was like, huh? He said, what you on? And I'm like, is he putting me on the spot here? I was like, sorry, what do you mean? He said, don't give it that, Chris. He said, I used to do a few pills and potions in the Navy. I know the score. Just be honest with me. And I'm like, why? It's like people been saying anything, you know. That was like my biggest
Paranoia?
not paranoia, just genuinely like, you know, we haven't got a good attitude to any of that stuff in this country. Sometimes for right reasons, but quite often, I mean, I was harmless, James, you know what I mean? I wasn't going to hurt anyone. I was stealing my Bovril. That was the limit of my criminality. Well, actually, I did try and steal a car, but that's another story. But, you know, you're very conscious of getting alienated from your community, I suppose you'd say, or being, he's that guy, you know, that guy that there. And maybe I worried back then too much about that, but, you know, I obviously had good reason to. And so I said, what, people have been saying anything? He said, Chris, he said, forget about them. He said, if you must know, yeah, a couple of people have said something to me. He said, but, he said, Chris, you ignore them. He said, they're never going to understand someone like you. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, Chris, the way you deal with them kids, he said, it's really special, mate. He said, and these people, and he's pointing to my neighbours, they don't understand special people. And I'm like, I'm gobsmacked. And he's so I'm just trying to recall the conversation. He said something like, he said, Chris, those kids fucking idolise you, man. He said, when you're not here, when you go out, they all sit on the curb outside your house waiting for you to come home. And I was like, do they? And he's like, he said, yeah. And he's just basically saying this stuff that's, it stunned me, James. I never, like, set out to try to be any kind of person, but now he's throwing, you know, he's like holding a mirror up to the kind of person that I wanted to be. Do you know what I mean? An adult that's good to kids, not an adult that shouts at kids or hits kids or doesn't give them their time, sort of thing, you know. And I wish I could. It's in my book, 40 Nights. I'm not telling this very well, but he's like, now fuck off inside and get some sleep. And that was it. I went inside and I was just humbled by what he said. The fact that he'd taken the time to come out 11 o'clock at night, he had his dressing gown on, he'd come and said something so nice to me. And again, it was just one of those moments. And the funny thing was, as I walked through the door of my house, my nose exploded because my blood pressure was so high from injecting so much of this speed. It just sprayed all over the room, just like a fire hydrant. It was almost comical, and I just crashed and I just started sobbing, but just not even like sobbing in a bad way. Just I like, you've got all this emotion, you know, years of it, you know, 35 odd years or whatever it is, and it's all got, if you haven't dealt with it, it's all got to come out, right? And it all came out. And then, funnily enough, a friend phoned me. She's like, "You right, lovey?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm just." She's like, "Oh," and then we ended up just laughing down the phone, and it was so therapeutic, right? And so I thank that guy. That's what you know. When people talk about angels, that is what that guy was, right? And the next thing that happened is I'm still out there the next night, right? Because I'm, you know, obsessive compulsive trying to get this car fixed. And a car pulled up in the street. And the next thing I know, it's my old mate is looking under the bonnet at me. I hadn't seen him since this whole thing started. I hadn't seen him since I got back to the UK, and I've been there a year and a half, if not longer now. And I said, "Hello, mate." And he's like, "You all right, Chris?" I'm like, "Yeah, and I'm pointing this screwdriver at my car, you know, as if this like makes any sense. And I said, yeah, I got a problem with the head gasket. He went, yeah, I can see that, and I can sort of see where this is going. And cut a long story short, he's like, Chris, I've heard everything, and I'm really concerned about you, mate. And this is a very old friend of mine, right? We've known each other since we were like 5 years old. Never had a bad moment between us, right? I just haven't seen him since I've been back. And again, cutting a story short, I knew that was my moment, James. That was my moment to get out of this. And I looked at him. I'm hesitating because his name, I've given him a pseudonym in my book, but let's just say he's called Lee, right? And I'm like, Lee, can I come and stay with you? He said, oh, Chris, I'm so happy you've asked me that. I wanted to ask you to come to my house, but I didn't want to like impinge on you. He said, right, just stop all that shit. Come now. And that was it. I stepped into normality for the first time in 2.5 years, just a proper, normal, tidy house. He gave me a load of clothes and said, put them on. I was having a shower with hot water because I hadn't had a hot bath or a hot shower because I couldn't afford to put the heating on, right? I'm having this shower and there's bubbles everywhere. And he's got all these smellies. And I'm like, oh, Yves Saint Laurent, I'll try a bit of that. Oh, look at a pack of Rabanne, I'll try a bit. It's just, I'm like blooming, I don't know, like a kid in a candy store, literally. And it just felt so amazing. Everything was clean. He did his washing up. Everything was, it looked new. He lived in this kind of like smart little cottage down on the Barbican, which is the seafront in Plymouth. And he said to me, he saw me looking at the food cupboard, right? Because I'm starving. I'm really eating for 2.5 years. And he said, Chris, that's my food in there. I've paid for it. You help yourself to anything you want. Just don't fucking ask me. What he's trying, do you know what I mean? What he's trying to say is like,
what's his is yours.
What's his is mine. He said, I just want you better, Chris. And, that's a good mate, James,
That was a turning point for you then? Out of it all?
Well, all of these are turning points, but that was the,
Yeah. So through it all, Chris, through all the madness, because that story's fucking, it's nuts. Because you speak it, you might not, I don't know if you feel it or see it, but it's crazy the roller coaster that you had. Yeah. So through it all, you've come out it. Yeah. You do your running, you've got your book. What's the plans for you now for kicking on for the future?
I'd really like to get the podcast up and running proper. I've been kind of putting it together at the minute, putting a few sort of podcasts on YouTube, but they're all, I would say they're random, but I've been kind of like shooting the shotgun at the side of the barn and seeing what hits, if you know what I mean. It's kind of funny that the marine stuff really has taken off big time. I can put a marine video on YouTube and it gets like 1,000 views in the first day. I say it's funny, it's because I'm a pacifist now, and I wouldn't, I kind of have a very different view on war to that which I did when I was 18, right, and when I joined up. And but at least through these videos, I can have this honest conversation with what are predominantly young men, and I get a lot of emails and a lot of messages through Instagram saying, Chris, I'm in this situation. I wanted to join the Marines for this, but now I'm kind of a bit suspect about these conflicts and this kind of thing. And but that's where I want to go. But to do something like this would be wonderful. I already can kind of picture some guests in my mind. One of my good friends, Baz Grace, skied to the South Pole quite recently. I know an amazing, another former commando, Lee Spencer, lost his leg in a road accident when he was trying to help a motorist who'd broken down. And that didn't stop him rowing across the Atlantic and smashing 4 world records. I've got these, I know a few interesting people that I'd like to get on the podcast and finish off the books. I'm writing one at the moment. It's going to be called, I don't know, let's just say a work in progress, 999 miles, how I ran an ultramarathon a day for 37 days without training, something like this. I didn't do any training for that run, which is another story again. And then after that, I want to put just the life lessons that I've realised I've learned now, James, from everything that I've been through and to get where I am now. I mean, for the benefit of anyone struggling, if anyone's listening to this and you're struggling, like I was where you are, and now I look back at my life since then, and I've lived, worked and travelled in 80 countries across all 7 continents. I've explored the Antarctic. I've scuba dived, on icebergs and down there. I'm a qualified pilot, qualified skydiver, 1,000-mile ultra runner, obviously, quadruple Ironman. I did a quadruple Ironman for my 50th birthday just to show people, and I did 2 months training for it just to show people, like, if you want, the power of the mind.
Mindset.
Obviously, I'm an author. I'm a graduate. I'm a very proud father and partner. And, I've driven buses to India and back, volunteer workers to India and back. I've worked in post-war Mozambique. Just had...
an extraordinary life.
Well, it's not extraordinary to me, James. I just... Yeah. I through what I went through back, what I've just told you, when I came out the other side, it's like, right, let's smash this thing now. 3 years in the wilderness, that's okay to find out who you are, and find out what's important in your life, and realign all your values and your thinking, because what society imbues you with, if that's the right word, it's just a crock of shit, Everything you're taught from such a young age, it's just a lie, or it's the truth with a wrapper around it that suits some ruling elite, or some banker somewhere. And through my experience, I've been able to just see through that facade, and really see the truth in life, and like I say, formulate these. I don't like to call them rules, but let's just say that they're rules that have allowed me to just achieve every single thing that I ever wanted to do. And that will be the book I will write after I've written my 999 miles book.
Yeah, definitely an autobiography in there as well, Chris. For what you've came from to what you've achieved after it is phenomenal. And first of all, mate, I'm proud of you. Another thing we'll touch on, I know obviously you went to the army at 18, but your mindset's kind of changed now with it. So what's your opinion on war and armies?
The opinion... Basically, since the television came around, I'd say the vast majority of people get their information from it. And of course, and we've all been a party to this at some point in our lives, where you just assume that that's authority, so it's all the truth, right?
But in reality, it's all bullshit.
Oh, it's yeah. I mean, it's all. It's like I say. I know what I'm saying now won't make sense to some people, because it's a certain process you have to go through it, and a way to understand it is, you remember those pictures you get and they're all dots. There's like green dots and red dots, and it just looks like a picture full of dots. And you look at it, but someone else looks at it and goes, no. If you stare at it like this, you see a spaceship, and there's a little green man there, and there's a crater. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's how life is for me now. Off the back of my experience of addiction, it realigned my thinking to think in different ways. And so with war, it's not difficult, James. You could spend half a day using a search engine and find out that most conflicts are constructed.
Are funded.
Funded.
Both sides are funded by the same.
Yeah, funded by these ultra rich banking families, that's it. And they do it at the expense of the lives of young men and women, or at the expense of the limbs of young men and women. And it's a very the actual issue of fabricating war is quite a simple thing. I mean, it's just been done since, well, I'm going to say thousands of years, right? It's not a new thing. But to try to explain all the intricacies of it is a bit more complex, right? But we're human beings. We're very clever. We've got the biggest brain, apparently, of all the creatures, and we can come up with a much better solution than to keep buying into this war thing all the time, right?
Yeah, there's a Charlie Chaplin speech. I think it was like the 40s or 50s, a film called The Dictator. So for anybody watching, check out YouTube for it. It's a powerful speech.
Yeah, that's
very
right.
Powerful.
Yeah.
So Chris, I don't know where to begin with that, mate. That was, and that's when you only scratched the surface, I guess. But for coming on, mate, and telling your story, it's phenomenal. And to having you in a good place again, doing runs, doing your charity work, it shows that it can be done no matter what misery
definitely.
and pain that you've done.
Definitely.
Would you like to finish up on anything, Chris?
Just say thank you for your audience. Really appreciate it. I'm living now my dream life, James. It's nothing to do with fancy cars or money. It's I'm in a position now I can really support people, not even people that are struggling, but just people that want some direction in their life. I'd say to anybody that's going through a bad period that maybe is contemplating suicide, I promise you, this feeling is temporary. The way you're seeing the world at the minute is not the way the world actually is. It's just the way that your brain's constructing it because you don't know the way forward. But things will get better. They always do. And then you'll look back and you'll think, blimey, can't believe I used to be like, can't believe. So, yeah, hang in there.
Good stuff, Chris. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure, brother. I wish you all the best for the future, all the best for your podcast, new books. Check out his book, Eat and Smoke, as well, which we'll put the link in the bio. So, it's been a pleasure, mate, and all the best.
James, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.